My name is Tina Hayes. I'm 33, an interior designer, the kind who can make a cramped room breathe. At 9:06 p.m., my phone lit the kitchen like a match. The text was short enough to fit in a whisper. Don't call, don't come, it's over between us. It was from my mother. I set my mug down so gently the porcelain didn't dare click. I exhaled, let the words stand there like a stranger at my own door, and typed back two more. Got it. The apartment held its breath with me. Refrigerators hum, pipes knock, neighbors laugh. Tonight even the building went still. If you've ever been erased by someone who raised you, you know the quiet turns physical. It presses on your ribs. Before we go on, tell me where you're watching from in the comments, and subscribe to the channel if you want more true-to-life family drama told straight. The message didn't shatter me. It rearranged the furniture in my head. Every lamp felt too bright, every shadow too honest. I watched the steam curl from the tea I would not drink, and thought about how ordinary goodbyes usually come with periods. This one arrived without punctuation, like a door slammed as the latch catches. I waited for the sting behind my eyes, for that hot panic that makes your throat small. Instead, there was form, edges, outlines, the way a room reveals itself when you finally switch on the task light. I placed the phone face down, the way you turn over a photograph you're done admiring, and listened for the old reflexes. Explain, negotiate, promise. None showed up. The clock ticked on the stove, stubborn in its certainty. I could smell lemon oil from the cutting board I'd wiped earlier, clean and a little medicinal. In the window, my reflection looked like a person who had just learned a fact, not suffered a wound. Somewhere down the hall, a door shut. Somewhere outside, a siren braided itself smaller and smaller until it disappeared. I stood there in that distilled quiet and understood something I had only suspected. Some endings don't ask your permission. They arrive, they name themselves, and then they make room. From the sidewalk, we looked like a postcard. 5 restaurants carried my father's name in gold across Portland. My brother Jake shook hands in the dining rooms like he'd invented warmth. My mother kept the books with a pencil that never smudged. I learned early how to be the space between other people's sentences. In our house, gifts arrived on 2 different calendars. When Jake turned 14, a mountain bike rolled out of the garage with a bow big enough to be a flag. I got a used frame the next month. Dad and I spray painted it blue to match the family. When Jake totaled his first car, a replacement showed up before the bruises faded. When I got a parking ticket, I lost the keys for a month and a lecture for a year. I kept my head down and drew, drafting tables, chair lines, the way light lands on wood, small things that made sense without anyone's permission. When the design school in Seattle accepted me, I brought the letter home like a flare. Dad said the restaurants needed me. If I walked away, I was choosing strangers over blood. Mom didn't look up. I packed anyway. I waited tables at night, tutored freshmen in the afternoons, learned how to stretch groceries without breaking my pride. I mailed postcards every semester. The mailbox stayed quiet. I came back to Portland after graduation, older in the ways that count. I took small jobs, starter apartments, offices with loud carpet, bistros that wanted to feel like Europe on a Tuesday. Clients paid on time and trusted my eye more than my family trusted my name. Then Mom got sick. Chemotherapy, radiation, a specialist down in San Francisco. Insurance covered the brochure, not the bill. I booked flights, hotel rooms, prescriptions, follow-ups. I didn't keep score. She texted once. Thank you, I saved it anyway. Jake had ideas. First a food truck with a clever name, then a rescue plan for one of Dad's kitchens when the ovens died in the middle of festival season. The truck stalled 6 months in. I wired money. The kitchen limped. I covered the lease on new equipment. At holidays, Jake talked about restructuring, and Dad nodded like he'd just heard Harvard. No one mentioned where the checks came from. I told myself that respect shows up after the help does, that families find their balance if you stand still long enough. Last week, Dad called about a family dinner to talk business. I said yes. The family dinner came and went with the usual choreography. Jake talking like a press release, Dad setting deadlines no one questioned, Mom passing bread like a truce. A week later, I realized I'd left an old portfolio in their attic and swung by after work to grab it. The house threw a warm glow through the curtains. It was close to 7, the kind of hour when the day's edges soften and you believe things might be kinder than they are. Inside, the smell of Mom's pot roast rose up from the hallway. I set my keys on the entry table and started for the stairs. Then I heard my name. Dad's voice. Low, decided. Jake's the only one who cares about this family. He's the future. I stopped with one hand on the banister. Chairs scraped, silverware clicked. Jake's laugh floated in. "So it's settled then?" he said, easy as a joke told twice. "Everything goes to me." Dad didn't hesitate. Everything. The house, the restaurants, the accounts. My palm cooled against the wood rail. I waited for my mother to clear her throat, to ask a question, to say my name as if it belonged in the room. Her fork met the plate, a small sound, and then her voice, thin as tissue. "She did pay for my treatment, Stephen." Dad's tone went granite. That was her choice. "You don't reward someone for doing what they should have done out of love." Jake chuckled, lighter this time, like a man admiring a view. "Guess I'm the heir." The word heir hung there longer than it should, the extra beat you give a punchline when you're sure it lands. I stood still until my heartbeat stopped making its own weather. The banister felt smooth and indifferent under my fingers, the way furniture does in a hotel. Useful, not yours. I backed away one step at a time, careful of the floorboards I knew would complain. In the foyer mirror, I caught a glimpse of my face and didn't recognize the expression, something past surprise, quiet as a decision. I picked up my keys without a sound and let myself out into evening air that smelled like rain finding warm pavement. Driving home, the city lights blurred at the edges as if the windshield understood what I'd just learned. I wasn't part of a legacy. I was a line item. At a red light, I pressed my thumb against my wrist and watched the pulse settle, steady enough to hold me. I parked, climbed the stairs to my apartment, and stood in the doorway a long time before turning on a single lamp. The room came up in a circle of light, clear and honest. Some truths don't argue, they announce themselves and wait. I stood in the small circle of lamplight until the room stopped tilting. Then I pulled the laptop closer and opened my banking dashboard. The screen came alive with polite rectangles, payments due, payments pending, payments approved. It read like a family diary written in numbers. Mom's prescriptions, restaurant utilities split across locations. Equipment leases I hadn't signed, insurance premiums with my card on file, Jake's temporary business line that had never gone dark. I scrolled once, slow, then I started. Click, cancel. The pharmacy autopay blinked to manual. Click, cancel. The downtown location's gas bill detached from my card and asked for a new method. Click, cancel. The equipment lease sent a warning about penalties. I read it. I accepted it. I moved on. Where I couldn't cancel, I replaced. I changed passwords on accounts I'd opened to help, turned off shared logins, removed saved cards from profiles I hadn't visited in months. Security emails stacked up like dominoes. Was this you? Yes, it was. New device sign-in, also me. I told the bank to decline charges from vendors tied to the restaurants and set alerts for anything that looked like an old habit trying to resurrect itself. Somewhere after midnight, the apartment took on that late-hour hum, the one that reminds you buildings have hearts. I paused long enough to make notes. Who owed what, when it started, who asked, then filed the notes in a folder named with a single word, boundaries. My phone lit up with the first tremors, unknown numbers, a couple of texts that read like nudges. I turned the screen over and let it glow against the table. I kept working. The insurance company wanted me to call to confirm removal. I did. The representative asked if I was sure. I said I was. She read her script about coverage gaps. I thanked her for the warning and signed the form anyway. By 2, the list was shorter. By 3, it was clean. I logged out, then back in to make sure all the doors were actually locked. The dashboard looked different, empty in the right places, the kind of empty that creates space. I closed the laptop and listened to the quiet fill back in around me, not heavy anymore, not sharp, just quiet. Dawn found the edge of the blinds and slid a thin blade of light across the counter. I wiped the mug I'd abandoned, set it on the rack, and said it out loud so the room could hear it too. Not anymore. Morning carved a narrow line of light across my counter, and with it came a different kind of energy, work energy, clean and directional. I pulled the folder they'd laughed at from the bottom of my bag, my eco-renovation blueprint for multi-unit dining groups. Reclaimed heat loops, water-smart prep lines, modular service cores that cut downtime, a materials map that made sustainability look like good math. I laid out the pages, smoothed the edges, and opened my contacts. I started with a manager I'd met at a hospitality conference, Pacific Restaurant Group, the kind of partner with enough locations to make a plan breathe. I typed an email that didn't grovel, didn't sell my biography, just led with the value. 2 images, a 3-line summary, and a short ask, "Can we talk this week?" At 9:12 a.m., the reply came back fast enough to make the cursor look slow. "We love it. Can you present tomorrow at 10?" I checked my calendar, moved 2 site walks, and wrote back yes. The rest of the day belonged to the deck. Before and after flow diagrams, staged CapEx, payback curves, staff retraining that fit between lunch and dinner rush. I practiced the open twice, then a third time, not for charm, for clarity. The calls started climbing my phone. Mom, Dad, unknown numbers, then Jake. I turned the ringer down and kept building. Around noon, I ate at my desk and printed handouts on 32-pound stock because substance should feel like substance. I packed the samples, zipped the case, and slept like a person who had finally stopped arguing with the past. The conference room the next morning faced North Light. 3 executives, 1 operations lead, and a facilities director with notes already printed. I walked them through the numbers, then the textures, then the path from concept to rollout, without closing a single dining room. Questions met answers at a steady tempo. At the end, the COO leaned back the way people do when their mind has already crossed the street. "What would phase 1 cost?" $600,000, I said. 4 clusters, 8 locations, 90 days. We'll earn it back in 18 months. He nodded like I'd read a number he'd been hoping to hear. "Send the draft." By Friday afternoon, the contract was signed. $600,000, phase 1, start date next month. I walked out into a city that felt newly calibrated. The air in my apartment that evening seemed taller. It wasn't revenge money, it was measure. Proof that the work held its own shape without anyone's last name propping it up. I set the signed copy in a folder marked current and let the silence return. Not the old kind that bruised, the new kind that made room. 3 days after the contract cleared, my studio smelled like cut cardboard and coffee. I was labeling material samples when a soft knock found the glass. Marisol stood there in a raincoat, hair pulled back, eyes rimmed red like she'd slept beside a worry, and it had rolled over on her. She didn't wait for an invitation. She stepped in, closed the door carefully, and held a manila folder like you carry something that can burn. "He doesn't know I'm here," she said. I set the box cutter down. "Tell me what you need." She pulled the stack onto my work table. Receipts, bank statements, internal transfers. Vendor payouts rerouted to a personal account that shared Jake's mailing address. A wire to a jeweler for a watch that cost what a line cook makes in a year. First-class flights to Miami that didn't line up with any food festival on the calendar. Cash advances labeled emergency payroll that never showed up on pay stubs. Dates circled in pink, then underlined in black, like she'd tried hope before she settled on certainty. "I started helping with the books when we got engaged," she said. "At first I thought the numbers were off because the kitchens were busy. Then I tracked the same holes month after month. It's 3 years, Tina." Her voice thinned. "I asked him once. He told me I didn't understand business. Then he changed the admin password." I pulled a legal pad closer and made a clean list. Merchant IDs, amounts, dates, account tails. I asked for copies of the emails that approved releases, and she slid over screenshots with Jake's initials in the subject line, the kind of casual arrogance people develop when they believe rooms will always clap. "Why bring this to me?" I asked. "Because you're the only one who won't pretend it's a misunderstanding," she said. "And because I can't marry this." We worked in quiet, the good kind, while the printer breathed out duplicates. I scanned everything to a drive, named the folder plainly, backed it up twice, then slipped the originals back into her manila jacket. She watched my hands like she was handing off a lifeline. "I'm leaving him," she said. "My mother thinks I should wait. I don't want to wait." "You don't have to," I said. She nodded once, a small, decisive movement, and wiped at her face with the heel of her hand. When she left, the room held the faint scent of rain and something else, like a window had opened on a truth that had been fogging the glass for years. I locked the evidence in my cabinet, wrote the meeting notes in tight, steady lines, and closed the book. The path was clear now, and it ran straight. The text from Dad arrived without greeting. "Family meeting, tomorrow, 2 p.m., Bridge Cafe." I printed 2 packets that night. Marisol's documentation in one, my signed $600,000 contract in the other, and slept with the steadiness that comes when a line has been drawn straight. Bridge Cafe smelled like burnt espresso and wet coats. They were already there when I walked in. Dad squared to the door, Mom staring past the window like the street might give her a cue, Jake scrolling with his thumb moving faster than his thinking. I set my bag on the empty chair and stayed standing. "You're going to turn the payments back on," Dad said, as if he were reading a schedule. "No," I said. "You're acting like a child," he shot back. "This is a family business." I placed the first packet on the table and slid it across to him. "Then let's talk family. Vendor transfers rerouted to a personal account. Emergency payroll that never reached payroll. First-class flights labeled as research. 3 years. Jake's smile tightened. "What is this?" "Evidence," I said. "Marisol brought it to me." Dad snatched the pages, flipped, then stopped. Color went out of his face the way lights go out in sequence. "Where did you get this?" "From someone tired of mopping up what doesn't spill." Mom whispered Jake's name like it might turn into the Jake she preferred. He pushed back his chair an inch, then another. "It's fake," he said. "You're so jealous you'll do anything." I opened my bag again and set down the second packet. "While we're trading facts, Pacific Restaurant Group, Phase 1, 8 locations, 90 days. $600,000. I tapped the signature page. "The proposal you all called a waste? The market didn't agree." Dad looked from the contract to me, then to the evidence again, as if one might cancel the other. "Even if he made mistakes," he said, softer now, "we handle it privately. You don't turn your back on family." "I didn't," I said. "You texted me to. I simply listened." Mom reached for my hand across the table. I moved mine to my lap. "Sweetheart," she said, voice small and practiced, "we can fix this if you—" "No," I said evenly. "You can fix what is yours to fix." Jake slapped the table hard enough to rattle the cups. "This isn't over." I met his eyes. "It is." Silence settled. Thick, not heavy. I gathered both packets, returned them to my bag, and stood. Dad stared at the coffee he wouldn't drink. Mom stared at her hands. Jake stared at the door like he could make it lock from the outside. I left exact change for the coffee I hadn't finished and stepped back into the rain, the kind that cleans a city without asking it to apologize. Rain thinned to mist by the time I reached the corner. I walked home without checking my phone. The city felt scrubbed, neon flatter, sidewalks honest. That night I filed the meeting notes, locked the cabinet, and slept without dreaming. The fallout didn't arrive with sirens. It came as paperwork. Vendors called Dad about past due balances no longer patched by a card that wasn't his. A week later, an accountant quit. 2 managers left within a month. By the third, the downtown dining room sat half-lit on a Friday, the kind of quiet that scares waiters because it keeps them counting. Jake sent one message, "You'll regret this," and then nothing I needed to answer. 6 months turned the calendar and then the story. Aunt Patricia phoned late on a Tuesday, her tone wrapped in that mixture of pity and curiosity relatives keep for weather and scandal. "Honey, they lost the restaurants," she said. "Bankruptcy, lawsuits. Your brother, there are charges. Your father's at a hardware store on Sandy. Your mother's doing hours at the department counter." I stood at my studio window and watched the late sun rub gold onto glass towers. I told her I hoped everyone found their footing. It was the truth I had to offer. Work filled in the rest. Phase 1 rolled out on time. The energy savings matched the model within a margin I could be proud of. The operations team sent photos of kitchens breathing easier, clean lines, faster turns, fewer breakdowns. The contract for Phase 2 landed with a single sentence I kept. Let's keep going. On a Sunday, I cleaned my apartment the way you do when you've decided to stay. Lemon oil on the cutting board, vacuum lines straight as rules you can live by. I pulled Mom's old text from the archive. Don't call, don't come, it's over between us. And read it like a document that had served its purpose. I didn't feel the wall of silence anymore, just distance measured in miles I'd chosen. Here's what I learned, the kind that stays useful after the credits roll. First, boundaries beat bailouts. If love can only find you through your wallet, it was never love knocking. Second, silence is a stance. The person who says nothing at the table isn't neutral, they're the breeze behind the loudest voice. Third, market your worth. If a room refuses to see you, take your work to the place that does and let the contract do the talking. That evening, I poured a single glass and stepped onto the balcony. Traffic stitched a low seam through the city. The air tasted clean. Peace, I realized, doesn't ask permission. It moves in once you clear the space.